Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today to talk about how you can supercharge your Sentinel SIM deployment. I have with me Aditya, who's the Chief Product Officer at DataBahn.ai, and who spent over 12 years building and crafting security products from scratch in the technology landscape. We're also very excited to have with us Davide, who is the co-founder of DOTDNA, and he spent over 20 years working on driving defensive and offensive security, and he has a unique perspective on SIM deployment.
Hmm.
And over the last couple of years, with Sentinel being so popular, both of these folks have lots of insights to share on how you can make the most use of your Sentinel deployment. So let's begin with you, Davide. What is your experience with Sentinel been?
So my experience with Microsoft Sentinel started 5 years ago with a migration project from Splunk. At the time, Sentinel was still in the very early stage, limited out-of-the-box integration, minimal built-in content, and the platform required significant customization. Since then, Sentinel has evolved tremendously with major improvement, integration, automation, detection capabilities. Today, the majority of our customers are either already transitioned to Sentinel or they are moving towards it for several reasons. The first is embedded inside Azure, right? The second, Sentinel offers seamless integration with Azure, Office 365, Defender services, reducing onboarding complexity. And the third, Sentinel now delivers some of the most accurate out-of-the-box detection for Microsoft-related data sources, leveraging Microsoft Deep Insight directly in their environment.
And that's very consistent, David. And first of all, thank you, for taking the time, to be here.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, and yes, we've been seeing a lot of enterprises, make the move to Sentinel lately. And to your point, it makes a lot of sense, when you break it down that way, right? For starters, Sentinel is a cloud-native SIM, right? So which means, there's not many of those on-prem headaches, that you've, previously, dealt with. Scales, pretty well with cloud workloads, right? So you're not, dealing, with infra limitations otherwise, experienced, with an on-prem SIM. And yeah, if you're already an Azure shop, it's almost a no-brainer, right? The integrations, like you said, with the Microsoft suite of tools and services, are super tight, right? Making the SOC operations a lot more, seamless. And then Microsoft's also been doubling down on AI and automation, right? With Security Copilot, right? Helping customers to push, security automation to a whole new level, right? That said, while the move to Sentinel is compelling or has been, compelling for a lot of teams, we've also seen a lot of those teams hit roadblocks along the way, right? Starting with data ingestion costs, can skyrocket, right? And many teams, from what we have seen on the field, have not anticipated how fast, those costs add up, right? It's almost always a surprise, to them, right? Or bringing in third-party sources, right? Beyond the Microsoft ecosystem, right? And it's not as straightforward as many have experienced. Pipeline resilience, has been a challenge. Sometimes they've had log delays, ingestion failures, just visibility gaps, that has hindered security operations. And of course, the sheer volume of security telemetry, as we all know, right? And without the right way of structuring and proper analytics, sometimes teams struggle to extract meaningful insight, right? Yeah, just to recap, I think while Sentinel is a very powerful option, making the most of it often takes careful planning, especially around pipelines, cost control, third-party integrations, and that's where we see a lot of organizations looking for help, right? And that's what we are here to explore today, right? How Sentinel customers can optimize costs, streamline data, and make their data more actionable, right? Now back to you, Davide. You said you worked with a lot of Sentinel customers. What's your take on these challenges? Where do you see security teams struggling the most?
So, great question. Sentinel offers huge advantages, especially for companies that are deeply embedded in Microsoft ecosystem, right? But with advantages come also challenges. The first major challenge is about cost visibility and predictability. I remember 10 years ago, the mantra was like, let's onboard everything inside the SIEM. Then at some point, the costs start skyrocketing. And now, if you ask, I need to onboard a new data source, the reply is always, what is the use case? Why you need this data source? We really need this data. This reflects, in a way, the shift in the mindset, right? But also the fact that it is a challenge for the organization to keep the SIEM costs under control. So this is the first. The second is about, for Sentinel specifically, when you want to onboard third-party integration technologies. So if you want to onboard the Microsoft-related data sources, it's just a few clicks away. But if you want to onboard third-party API, syslog-based, we know that Microsoft is adding probably on a weekly basis new integration inside the Content Hub. But we know that the organization needs to rely on custom integration, custom made, using Azure Function, using Logic App if you want. And somebody needs to take care of this and needs to keep up to date the integration, both on the technology side and on Sentinel side, because also Sentinel is changing frequently. So the third challenge is about the data pipeline monitoring. So Sentinel doesn't offer out of the box any way to monitor the health status of the data sources. If a data source suddenly stops sending event, usually security teams realize this just during the investigation, and it's too late. It's a kind of Murphy law. The only log you need is the only one you never onboard in your system. And the last challenge that is my favorite is about the log filtering. So organization needs to discriminate between logs that are actionable and security relevant versus logs that are not immediately actionable. And maybe you can save this log in a blob storage. And you can do investigation further, right, when you need. So this is something that you have to consider in the moment in which you want to implement it and you want to design a SIEM strategy. Otherwise, you end up by flooding the SIEM with low-value data, right? And the costs, again, skyrocket.
So if I understand both of you correctly, we're in a situation where there are lots of businesses that are looking to transition to Sentinel. There's a lot of demand for it, and it offers fantastic features for companies that are trying to keep track of and stay ahead of security concerns. But there are challenges, and one of the big ones continues to be cost visibility and the volume of data going in, being able to figure out what is relevant and not relevant, and also managing the maintenance of the system, adding new sources, managing the integrations of existing sources as well as schemas, and finally telemetry, health, and pipelines. If logs aren't coming through, why is that happening? So for all of this, Aditya, have you seen similar trends when you've been speaking to Sentinel customers at your end?
Yeah, absolutely. What Davide said, exactly lines up, with what we've been seeing as well, right? A lot of security teams move to Sentinel, right? And at first, they're getting a ton of value, right? It's a great, platform. But then almost like clockwork, they hit this inflection point, right? Where, your cost starts, spiraling up, right? And suddenly they're at a crossroads, right? Do they hit the gas, keep going, or do they pause, reassess their entire data strategy, right? To be more cost conscious, right? And Davide, that's the mantra that, I've been, taught as well, right? That, hey, more data means, better security. But in the last year to 18 months, I think it's as if we have to build a new muscle, right? The SOC teams have to build a new muscle, trying to figure out what data to keep, what data to ingest, what data to cut, right? And all of this without compromising coverage or visibility, right? So many teams have now started figuring it out. Unfortunately, not all teams have bandwidth to do this, right? And when I first met Davide and the team at DOTDNA, they had already built out what they called as the actionable data ingestion framework, right? That kind of helps teams navigate this challenge. Maybe Davide, it'd be a great time for you to also walk us through how that works, right? From the lens of what you've been doing with your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Years ago, we developed a framework that we call Actionable Data Ingestion Framework. The goal of the framework was to reduce the cost while maximizing the value of the log ingestion into the SIEM. In a nutshell, the framework involved, first of all, listing all the cybersecurity domain you want to cover, you want to protect. Can be OT, security, cloud, endpoint, network, and so on. Then you need to map all the technology you have in place with a specific cybersecurity domain. Next, you define the use case and you map the use case to the cybersecurity domain. And at this point, you can map the event type within the data sources to the use case. So the outcome of the framework, there are two mainly. The first, of course, is about reducing data ingested inside the SIEM, so reducing costs. And the second is to prioritize data sources that can offer more value to your use cases. Because remember, it's not just about the running costs that you have for the SIEM, that increase in volume every year, but it's also the cost for onboarding a new data sources. And you know that sometimes cost, effort is painful. And there is also the cost for the maintenance of the integration itself. So as you can imagine that for DOTDNA, adopting DataBahn was like a natural choice at this point, because DataBahn embed this framework by default because of the data transformation, the aggregation, the filtering, the routing of the event. So DataBahn helped to achieve what we wanted to achieve with our framework by default. And now, with the upcoming Cruise AI, I think, guys, you will put this to the next level.
Thank you, Davide. And then, I mean, we spoke about, costs, so many times. We in fact, had a customer whose Sentinel cost tripled in about just 6 months, right? Because, they added more log sources. The problem wasn't that, they didn't need the data for it. It was just that they felt like they had very little to no control, right? In terms of figuring out, what is providing security value versus, what was, just noise, right? I think that framework is a great template, for, SOC teams to kind of, reassess, look at, how or where their data makes sense. And this is where, as a platform, we make a difference at DataBahn too, right? We help our customers very intelligently route only relevant data, right, using our AI powered models. Instead of sending raw logs, right, we normalize the data, we filter, we aggregate, and we extract only the relevant metadata, right, and events before sending them to Sentinel, right, so that we can dramatically reduce data costs, right, without again compromising security coverage or visibility, right? And our AI behind the scenes also continuously analyzes usage patterns, right? And like we all know, today your data and use case strategy may be one, but 3 months down the line, as the threat landscape changes, right, you have more use for data sets that you previously did not use as much, right? So that's where our AI comes in handy, right? We continuously assess, provide usage patterns, provide visibility into insights, right, and recommendations on how best to continuously optimize your data pipelines, how best to continuously optimize your costs, so that the security team overall, gets all the insights and that continuous value, that they need, right? Again, we feel like we've intelligently changed the game, right? When it comes to security operations. Now, maybe Davide, a question back to you, right? You had the framework, for years. You've now had the tool in the form of, DataBahn. How have you used, ADIF and, DataBahn at your customers? And what has the new approach been? What learnings have you, had from the field?
So I can use the example of one of my customer is a large enterprise UK, and they have one SIEM that is Microsoft Sentinel. They have an external SOC leveraging a SOAR for incident automation. And following an acquisition, they wanted to consolidate the two SIEM. The other organization had a different SIEM. It was Splunk specifically. And they wanted to consolidate inside Sentinel, and they want to consolidate the workflows for the Security Operations Center, then leveraging again the SOAR they have. So There were two main challenges. The first one was about consolidating inside one Sentinel, but without an impact on the cost. That looks great, right? You increase, but you don't want to touch the cost. This was the first one. The situation was pretty much they onboarded at the time 5 gigabytes per day of logs. The majority of them was to Panorama, was about more than 50% of the logs, and they had no filtering in place. They used the usual syslog collector with many regex, let's say, but not a real filtering in place. The second challenge was about they wanted to consolidate the incident workflow, but for the escalation of the incident, they want to diversify and they want to send incident belonging to a company to a specific escalation point. And the same for the cybersecurity reporting. They wanted to be able to discriminate between the two companies for the executive reporting. So what we did, we implemented DataBahn as a core component of the infrastructure. All the logs were collected by DataBahn. We use our framework to define cybersecurity domain to cover, use cases to cover. We map all the technology, and this was replicated inside the DataBahn by using the data transformation rule, by using aggregation, by using a routing rule, and so on. In this way, we were able to save pretty much 32% of the logs that were ingested inside Sentinel, with a cost saving around $230,000 per year. For what pertained the other challenge, again, we leverage DataBahn, and this time we leverage the tagging of DataBahn. What we did, we implement a lookup that is dynamic inside the DataBahn, and DataBahn is tagging all on the fly, all the logs that are passing through DataBahn. In this way, inside Sentinel, all the logs are already enriched with the information, and the information specifically is the company the logs belonging to. In this way, not only at the use case level, all the time you can discriminate what is the company, target of the incident, but also inside the SOAR, we implement a playbook that is looking for the specific tag and is performing the escalation to the correct queue. Same approach we use also for the reporting. We use a different platform, analytics platform, to do the dashboarding for the reporting. But again, everything is based on these tags.
Understood, Davide. I know that number and what you said sounded super complex, but folks who are listening in, and that's a number. It's just something that Davide and team helped this customer realize in a matter of days, right? And we've seen so many stories like that, right? That the impact is real, right? I think we had another example from another customer as well, and just within 2 weeks of the customer deploying DataBahn, they had a very, very significant reduction, right, in their Sentinel billing, right? And again, making sure that they've got visibility into the right data flowing in, and more importantly, not having to do any guesswork, right, in terms of figuring out what is needed, what needs to be safely routed to an alternate destination, so to speak. And thank you for the insights, Davide. Yeah.
So essentially, if you are able to use a platform like DataBahn and filter out the irrelevant logs out of Sentinel and use the ADIF framework as you described it, Davide, what you are able to deliver is the same level of security while taking away a lot of the problems when it comes to cost ingestion, comes to cost visibility, as well as alert fatigue when, with so much data going in which isn't relevant. I'm certain, security teams don't want to spend that much time chasing down irrelevant data. So if that is taken care of, some parts of the problem continue with regard to, say, the third-party integration. So how can SOC tackle that problem with Sentinel?
Yeah, I mean, see, we all know, Sentinel is fantastic, right, when it comes to when you're working with Microsoft native sources like Defender, M365, Entra, right, and so many other services within the Azure ecosystem, right? But the moment you want to branch out, right, and you want to integrate firewalls, endpoints, cloud logs, from beyond the Microsoft ecosystem, and mind you, we still see a lot of enterprises in that setup, right? Multi-cloud hybrid kind of a setup. That's where it gets tricky, right? Davide mentioned about a few points at the start of this session, right? When it comes to managing those syslog servers, these other agents, that's outside of the Sentinel ecosystem. Maybe Davide, if you can shed some light on some of the roadblocks that you run into, right? And then yeah, I would love to talk about how DataBahn is going about solving those two. Yeah. We had our first, your line is muted there.
Okay. When we started with Sentinel, there were few integration, probably less than 10, was really new. Microsoft is developing new integration, right, with the network partner and technology vendor also. But still, we know for a fact, because we can see every day, right, there are many custom integration in place. Most of them, again, when the data source is API based, most of the time Azure function, but with Azure function, you need to write the code. You can use PowerShell, you can use Python, but anyway, you need to write the code. The majority of the organization use Logic App. Logic App is easier, right? But there is a cost, because all the time you run the workflow of you pay. And when it comes to log onboarding, this have an impact, and this is real. So, but the main challenge is about keep up to date the custom integration, and we know that is not easy. And this, I guess, is the biggest limitation for integrating Sentinel with other data sources. So in DataBahn, there is a huge marketplace of integration, and integration are maintained by DataBahn, right? And even if you enable an out-of-the-box integration in Sentinel, you don't really have control on the event that you onboard. You don't have a real control on the field. I don't think people put their hands inside the out-of-the-box integration and check what are the field, how is the field extracted, and so on. This is something that you can do inside DataBahn. And we are doing this because this is the part of the process when you integrate a new data source inside DataBahn.
Yeah, and we take pride in taking on that boring function for you Davide, and for our customers, right? We build we release tens of integrations each week, right? I think we've just crossed about close to 400 450 integrations right now. And what we've also done to what you mentioned, Davide, is also we've templatized some of these integrations, right? Especially when you're taking those data feeds down to your Sentinel SIEM, right? Be it you want to take that to native tables, custom tables, you see a lot of these pre-packaged templates that are available, right? Just through a click, you have everything ready to go, right? Your data is connected to Sentinel. We've given you the ways for you to filter out data and transform this data into Sentinel native formats, right? So that you don't have to write those complex data collection rules, nor have to manage those complex data transformation rules on the other side, right? And to extend it, we've made our integration with Sentinel super tight, bi-directionally, right? So as you route data to a platform like Sentinel, right, we automatically understand the schema that you're using, because every customer's also got that flexibility to write their own custom tables, right, within Sentinel. And that's when things can get really tricky, right? So we've also oversimplified that for customers as part of our integration, right? Where possible, we align exactly with their schemas, either as part of native tables or as part of custom tables. And most importantly, also build this validation framework, right? So that the data pipelines and the SIEM are always super compatible, right? So this way, it need not have to be someone in the SOC dropping everything to figure out whether the data pipelines and the SIEM are in alignment, right? And which nobody's got the time to do these days.
So what we're saying is that using the frameworks that we've discussed and using the technology that you just discussed, Aditya, we can make sure that the data is flowing all the management of changing it from different formats, passing it, normalizing it, making sure it's going the right way into the SIM while filtering it. All of that can be part of the usual headache that needs to be taken up, but we are able to elevate what security teams are doing by freeing them up to do more important stuff by letting the technology do it. But that's still, and you mentioned telemetry health, so I'm going to ask you again because this doesn't cover that, right? It doesn't leave it open that if a pipeline isn't sending the data in, how do we solve for that?
Yeah, I mean, as a data pipeline or a data fabric, we have that responsibility now, right? We want to make sure that it's not our job just to collect the data and throw it over the fence, but provide that continuous assurance, provide that continuous visibility, saying that if there's any changes to log health, we want to be able to alert on that, right? Because we all know that SIM doesn't work if logs arrive late or drop or fall entirely, right? And that's the time that many organizations are now vulnerable to, right? So so we take care of all of that as part of the pipelines, right? And before I talk about how we go about solving that, Davide, what's your perspective here? Have you seen customers struggle with pipeline fragility, right? Forwarder health. You mentioned, you can do all of these things, but it comes with a cost. It comes with people's effort and custom monitoring and visibility that needs to be built. What's your take on that?
Yeah, all the organizations struggle with this topic, and Sentinel doesn't offer any out-of-the-box way to check the health status of the data pipeline. So usually, I can say there are two ways. One is to create super complex KQL searches in order to spot decreasing in volume anomalies in data sources and then trigger alert based on threshold. This is the first. The second, organizations rely on third-party monitoring tools, but these third-party provide you just information regarding the data source is up, is down, but not information regarding of the quality of the data if you are missing something inside.
Got it. And again, from our side, as a platform, we provide that full visibility, right? From data collection all the way to delivery, right? Every step along the way, how the pipelines are doing, right? So that you have that continuous visibility, right? Or any changes to data health, right? We covered some of it during our last webinar, right? How start to end, there is that full lineage visibility into what's going on with your pipelines, right? Because this is the place where you don't want to spend time trying to build custom code to figure out what's going on, how the data collection has been, or changes to data health for that matter too, right? We recently launched a health course tracking here, right, that autonomously tracks for changes in log health, log formats, schema drifts, anything at all to do with your data, right? So you can very quickly get that visibility here, right? I know we are coming up on time. I want to switch gears slightly here, right? Maybe this is more a question to Davide, as one of the thought leaders that we work with here, Davide, right? You've been having a front row seat, right, into how AI has been playing a role as well, right? Where do you think AI is making the biggest impact right now, right, on operations? I know there's often talks about automation, extreme automation, hyper automation, and all of that, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your perspectives there.
So in 2024, we saw the AI makes a significant impact on cybersecurity, incident response, and specifically for alert triage, enrichment, escalation. Think about Microsoft Copilot, think about all the SOAR platform that implement hyper automation, as you mentioned. But all this AI actually is triggered by human, right? By human prompt specifically. In 2025, the landscape is shifting with the introduction of the AI agent, autonomous AI agent. Now the human trigger is no longer needed. Now you can have, for real, an engineer that is working 24/7 with you, with also not just, let's say, with a proactive approach, without the human intervention. I think the AI autonomous agent will be the game changer from now on in the cybersecurity space.
Now, thank you, Davide, for that. I think that perfectly echoes with our vision, right? In terms of where we are headed, as a data pipeline, right? We recently launched Cruise, that's taking on some of these functions, right? Or if not most of the functions in an autonomous way, right? So that the time that you don't have the skills, that many SOC teams now try to take on themselves, right, to do complex data engineering, managing an infrastructure, right? We are letting Cruise take some of those on, right? This just shows how you can very simply go about onboarding data sources into a solution like Sentinel, right? I know we did a webinar last month that covers Cruise at a lot more depth in terms of where enterprises can look at some level of autonomy, right, on the data engineering side of the house, right? With that said, I know we've almost hit or maybe hit time here, right? Again, David, I want to thank you for taking the time here, right? And again, for those who've been listening in patiently, thank you for taking the time on a Monday morning, right? If you're struggling with Sentinel costs, complexity, streamlining data, or if you're one of those SOC teams that's been managing super complicated KQLs or queries to extract or make sense out of the data, who to reach out over here. And Vipul, I'm gonna just pass it on to you, right? You typically have some artifacts for the folks listening in, right? I'll let you take here.
Thank you so much, Aditya and Davide, in particular, walking us through a real kind of from the field example of how entities have been struggling with some of these challenges and ways to go overcome them. I'm sure is greatly appreciated. Folks, for everyone who's joined us, thank you so much. We will be sharing this video as well as some of collateral that puts together all of the thoughts and the insights that we've been able to get from David and Aditya, and we'll be sharing it with you soon. Please feel free to reach out to any of us if there's anything we can help you with regard to Sentinel. We'd be really happy to do the busy work while you guys can free yourselves up to focus on security the way it's meant to. But thank you so much. Have a lovely week ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.